Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am executive producer of Light Thief Productions, James Jackson. I'm your host for this morning's coffee break chat. Just checking out my Facebook Live production. Doesn't seem to be going live, but it says it is live, so weird. Anyway, as good morning to everyone. It's a fine Wednesday morning here in the city of Philadelphia, bright and sunny, a little chill in the air, as spring is wont to do here. This morning we'll be talking about the Philadelphia District Attorney's race, Krasner versus Vega. This is the primary here in the city of Philadelphia because you can't really compete in Philly politics unless you're a Democrat. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about who Krasner is, who Vega is, and who's supporting them. We're also going to talk a little bit about dick pics. There's a little bit happening with that here in the city. We're going to talk about parks and gentrification, and we're going to talk about some of the ballot questions that are on the ballot for the primary, and talk about those in order that they appear on the ballot. But the first thing we're going to do is talk to our special guest, Michael Broussard. Michael is here with the production of Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor. And let me arrange my pins on my screen in the proper order. Sorry, have you in the wrong place. There you are. Michael, please introduce yourself, your program, and what it is you do, and your pronouns.
My pronouns are he, his. My production is called Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor, and it's an interactive play. And basically, it's me telling the story of the abuse I survived and of my healing path. And I've been doing this since about 2014. And the important thing about it is that it's interactive. It's not just a straight play. They come and we talk afterwards. Throughout the presentation, people can ask questions, make comments, share in any way they see fit. The idea behind it being we need more conversations about trauma. And this is an effort to create live conversations.
Interesting. So you kind of have a live conversation, almost a workshop environment, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, the way that it breaks down in structure is I will tell some of my story. I will stop and go to the audience. We will have a discussion. They can ask questions, etc. And it's interesting you should say workshop, because that's a piece that's in progress. It hasn't found its final voice yet. This piece has been in essentially workshop by design since 2014 when I started doing it. Every time something happens in my life that's relevant to it, I'll add that. Every time somebody at a performance comes up to me afterwards and says something that blows my mind, I will add it. And in that way, the piece is never stagnant, and it's different every time we do it.
Awesome. That sounds like an amazing process. What brought you into doing this piece in this way, where it sounds as though it's constantly evolving, which was what brought the idea of workshop to my mind. Also, workshop not in the theater sense, but workshop in the sense of you get people together to work through an idea. What brought you to bringing this to a theater sort of environment?
Well, the show actually was, I guess, workshopped as well in therapy. I had told my then therapist, who I'd been with for a long time, who had helped me so much with trauma, that I want to do this thing where I go up on stage and tell my story. She's like, great. And I want to let people ask questions live to me. She's like, uh-oh. We've worked very, very hard here. Please. And I think it was her fear, as well as my fear initially, that people would come with an axe to grind, because there's plenty of people with an axe to grind when it comes to sexual abuse. And those people want to shut you up. They want to knock you down. And that was a fear. But I'm a theater artist. I had been a theater artist for many years. I had studied improv at Philly Improv Theater. And I was excited by the idea of something that was never set, because the progress that we make is not just progress for, the conversation, but we have people in the audience who make progress during performances. One of our early performances, we had a woman sitting with her boyfriend. We went to break for feedback. She started talking about the abuse she had suffered. Turns out she'd never told her boyfriend who was sitting next to her. She felt comfortable enough in this supportive environment to talk about these things. So that's the idea, is that we all come away with something, and this is the way I process, and this is the way I do things. That's what I said to my therapist when she got so worried. I was like, I have to process like this. Please understand. She relented, and we together started working on it. And I did not know the day that I told her that I wanted to do this, she was planning on telling me that she's about to retire. She heard me say what I said. She didn't say anything about retirement. She hung on until the first performance happened. She came to the performance. She hugged me afterwards, and she said, by the way, I'm retiring. And she passed me on to somebody new who was just as good.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry. There we go. There you are. Sorry, yeah, you weren't permanently on my second camera. Fix that. The work with your therapist led you to. Is this? Do you feel like this is kind of ongoing therapy for you, or ongoing therapy for you and the audience? Like how...
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. The concept of ongoing therapy, that really kind of hits at the center of it, because I have personal revelations. People in the audience have personal revelations. We have this room you can go to, which is a performance, where no one is going to knock you down, because we make sure the space is safe. We bring in therapist support people in case somebody gets triggered. And yeah, it's ongoing therapy for me and for the audience. I'll give you a good example of this, actually. I was doing a performance a couple years back, and I've always said, or up to that point, I'd always said, I don't have recovered memories. I remember everything. Well, in the show, I've been talking over and over again about the fact that I thought my abuser was around in my life for a year, and I found out later on from my sister that he was around for 4 years. And the very structure that was, she saw I was doing the show. We spoke on the phone, and she says, you say Harold was gone after the first year, but that's not right. Yeah, you told mom kicked him out, but she let him come back and take each of us for unsupervised child visits many, many times over the next 3 years. So I had not realized, or something's right in front of you and you don't get it till somebody says it to you. I'm up on stage talking about this. I get to like the third break, and the person's like, you said you don't have recovered memories, but then what was that story about? Boom. After the first performance, somebody comes up to me afterwards and says, there's a sequence in the performance where one time I portray how painful it is to actually be raped by an adult, or raped by whatever situation. I portray that. It's very vivid because I felt people needed to see and hear and understand that. I say it once, I do it once, then we can just refer it. Well, in that I say, the first time I had sex, I thought it was a punishment. Friend comes up to me afterwards and says, you called that the first time you had sex, but you didn't have sex, you were raped. There's a difference. And I was like, and now the show is, after that whole sequence, I say, so I called that the first time I had sex, but I didn't have sex. I was raped. There's a difference. The problem was I was 7 years old and I didn't know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
And it becomes this thing, right, where, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
These kinds of revelations are normally things that folks come out in, during the course of therapy. But we've all worked in theater for a long time, so we know that the therapeutic value of theater. So it's interesting that you're finding these things through performance, and your audience is also seemingly acting as your therapist, but you're acting as their therapist as well. You know, you're providing a perspective outside of them. But yeah, this is fascinating work. Where can people see it? Where can people come to participate?
The next performance we're doing is a virtual performance online, because that's the way we talk now. That's our language. And if you go to sexabusesurvivor.com, you will see first page on the top has information about tickets. The interesting thing about the virtual performance is that years back, when I started doing the show, which is 2014, as part of the Solo Festival, you know, I spent many years afterwards. I toured, I did a lot of in-person stuff. And then last year, here comes the pandemic. And we can't go into theaters together. We can't do this for a long time. For about a month, I was like, what am I going to do? This is the thing that I do. And then I was like, wait a minute. Online, I have the opportunity to do a bunch of new things that I couldn't do before. And I was like, you know what? I have this platform to talk about my story. I bet other people would enjoy that platform. And so Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor became not just the show, but our survivor meetups, but our survivor stories online, where people come and tell their stories and get feedback, by the Ask a Survivor interviews I do with people who are turning their trauma into help for the rest of the community, and all kinds of things that I couldn't do. And I have been able to reach people in New Zealand, in Italy, in France, in places I'd never heard of. I learned a lot of geography actually doing this. No, it blows my mind that this is not a limitation. This is a chance to reach the world and to do the work I do even better.
Great. It's super important work. I hope you have much success with it. I really am enjoying that this work that you're doing gets to combine this therapeutic work with your theatrical work. It's fascinating that that you're able to combine both. I would like to welcome to the feed and welcome to the screen Dr. Ardencia Hall Karambe. Dr. Hall is a regular guest of the coffee break chat. If you would introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Ardencia Hall Karambe, and my pronouns are she and her. And I'm an associate professor of theater and English at Community College of Philadelphia. I'm also artistic director of Kaleidoscope Cultural Arts Collective and the CEO of Art and Blair Enterprises, LLC.
Awesome. So I brought you to the screen a little bit earlier than I normally do, just because I wanted you to jump in and talk a little bit about this, because though we all work in theater, you know, you're better at it than me, to be honest.
But I appreciate it. I'm glad you brought me in, because I was finding the conversation very interesting. My company, Casey, actually just closed a show called First Cousins that dealt with sexual abuse and sexual trauma among four first cousins, and how it had been suppressed, and I should say 5 cousins. But the one that I played, the character of Brenda, she was the one who did not suffer, but she heard all of the rest of the cousins' experiences, and at her death, it triggered the memories of all of them. And we see particularly the character of Allie, who suffered the most at the hands of her stepfather. She lost her cousins in the process, as well as her youth, for lack of a better word. And in the end, that character takes matters into her own hands, and she sets the house on fire, burning up her abuser. So I was really interested in this conversation. And I also have an interest in drama therapy and how theater can be used in therapeutic ways to help people find different avenues in which to deal with trauma and have some type of safe distance through the effect of play when we're looking at it in that theatrical sense. So I applaud you. I'm sorry, I can't see the gentleman for some reason. I applaud
Michael.
Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How are you? I applaud you in the work that you're doing right now. I think it's really necessary and needed among many people. It's just something that people don't talk about, and we don't see it a lot in the theater per se, and especially dealing with it in the way that you're utilizing the elements of theater as well as drama therapy to deal with it with your audience. So bravo to you.
The reason I find it fascinating also from a Black perspective is that in the Black community, we oftentimes encounter similar problems to other communities in abuse, in rape, and in sex abuse. But there's a stigma, at least as far as I've ever encountered, to therapy and to the idea of seeking therapy in the Black community. And oftentimes our performance and our performance environments become therapeutic or are the link to therapy that a lot of community members have. And so it's interesting to see like a very specifically intentionally targeted therapeutic environment in a performance environment, to me.
It's interesting that I am doing these interviews and I'm talking to people over the years, and there's something new every time I talk to somebody about an aspect of what I do that I hadn't realized I was doing it. The whole thing with the interactivity and the improvisation came simply because my language at that point was improvisation, and I wanted to have a conversation. I, at the time, didn't think it was all that radical. I was like, well, this is the way to do this. And since then, I've had people come up to me and say, I never saw anybody do that like that. And to me, it's just that we need to be out in the open. We need to have these conversations. We need to be interactive. And I didn't even think twice about it. It was like, am I doing something special? I have no idea. But I'm just doing it. I'm doing what I do.
Interesting. Just as a sort of segue, going into dick pics, I want, it's a funny sounding topic, but it's also something that sex abuse survivors have to deal with on a regular occasion, and that is going around the theater community in Philadelphia right now, because there's a particular person whose account on Facebook is sending out a lot of dick pics to women in the community, and nobody can quite suss together why. The person's account has been non-responsive. I haven't been able to interview them or talk with them, so I don't want to identify them. But if you are involved in the theater community at all, you'll have seen posts about this from several people. I know as a sex abuse survivor, and I know a lot of other sex abuse survivors, that the idea of even receiving unsolicited nude photo, it can be triggering. Like, you open your phone and you get this random photo of somebody else's crotch. Not something that I necessarily want. And so I'm wondering, I assume other sex abuse survivors have the same issues, but from a sex abuse survivor's perspective, from somebody who who does a production that is all about sex abuse survival. What is your perspective on unsolicited nude photos of somebody's nether regions?
Well, I mean, you hit many of the important points, which is that it is triggering. I think one of the things about doing the work that we do when you're upfront about about the abuse, and when you're active, and when you're an activist, and when you're actively trying to make a difference by being totally upfront. My life, everything that's happened to me, I made a decision really early on. I was going to be 100% public with everything. The problem with being 100% public is that you become a target for people who want to knock you down, as I said earlier, and exactly what you're talking about. People will send you unsolicited dick pics. They will send you all kinds of crazy stuff. They will send you death threats. They will send you. Now, the triggering nature of those pics cannot be stated too loudly, as you were saying. And for me, it's tough. I can only imagine what it's like for people who identify as female getting male genitalia shoved at them, when in fact they are survivors of rape, of incest, of all kinds of sexual abuse. It triggers me. It can send me into a spiral, but in a way, how do I say this? It's not always convenient for me to go into a spiral, because I'm upfront with all this information and with these people who are getting something out of it. It's not always convenient for me to disappear, because I don't want people thinking, oh my God, where do I go now? Not that they have therapists, they have the whatever support system, but I kind of have to stay up front. And when I get hit with these things, just go, okay, this is not good right now. I'm what you call high functioning, which I'm sure you've heard of that. It means that I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have bulimia. I have depression. I have all these things, but I can pretend I don't to get something done. And that energy, that moment of dealing with somebody who's coming at you with these images that are just sending you into a situation where your abuser is now right beside you again. That for that moment of trying to stay public and do what you have to do, that becomes like a week's worth of energy, and you collapse afterwards. And so it becomes heavy lifting for yourself and heavy lifting for all of us. Luckily, I'm a member of a lot of groups that are for activists and advocates, and we keep each other strong and we help each other when these things happen.
It is good to have those support systems in place. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is in a press conference on Monday, Captain John Smith, of the captain of the homicide unit in Philadelphia, stated in part that the cycles of violence in Philadelphia are continuing because people involved don't trust the police and the legal system to provide justice. Linking that back to what I was saying earlier, that in the Black community, there's this kind of hesitance to seeking therapy, to seeking one-on-one therapy, as far as, and Dr. Hall, feel free to jump in if you think I'm being incorrect. I value your opinion.
No, I think you're very correct. We within the African American Black community, there is a hesitance when it comes to therapy. It's opening up a little bit more, but we've had a hesitance when it comes to letting, when you think about most therapists they were white, letting white folks into our business too much.
Correct.
So we had a tendency not to say anything, not to go into therapy, not to have this conversation. We go have this conversation with our good friend or with our minister.
Right, but with our pastor, yeah.
We wouldn't talk to a therapist because we don't have that history. And also the history just that Blacks have with doctors in general and medical science, it has not always been good. So there's a lack of trust when it comes to that. But now that we're seeing more Black therapists come on to the scene, we're seeing more Black people going into therapy. hopefully those walls of trust are being built, and that, we're going to become much more comfortable in finding ways to deal with our trauma, because just like every community, we have a lot of trauma, and we have had a lot of trauma that has been unchecked for decades, and that really needs to be extinguished from our community.
What I find interesting is efforts like this are building a support system outside of within the arts. It's building a support system. Michael, you've built a support system for your audience, and do you have a lot of regular audience or audience that comes back?
We actually do. And I think the reason for that is what you're talking about right there. They feel a connection to a community. And that's a very powerful thing, because the survivor community, like all over the world, at any moment, there's somebody who feels like I felt in the 70s, being alone and nowhere to go to and no one to talk to. So yeah, we do get a lot of the same people coming back. We get a lot of people who come to do survivor stories online, which is when you have like 4 or 5 people in an event, and they each take 10 minutes to tell some part of the story or read poetry or whatever. And you have a lot of people who get used to and get confident within the community, and then they do this, and it's their first time ever speaking about it in public. And I've been very grateful that the community that comes back to support each other, not just me supporting them and supporting me, but to support each other, has also created this space where people can feel safe. And I've seen several people go up to, now they're speakers. Now I go and do this and I go and do that, because I was able to do this safe thing where I knew that people would not knock me down, Yeah,
absolutely. And within the Black community, we have traditional methods of dealing with this community, with violence and trauma, that don't necessarily mirror or have the same systems as other communities. And it's interesting, like Dr. Hall mentioned a couple. There's the pastors, there's ministers, there's the church system, there's the community itself, like just being a member of the community. And I think that's also a very traditional within any Native or traditional community. It's very very common to have, especially the female population, for lack of a better term, really involved in this kind of community, dealing with social problems and dealing with this therapeutic need of the community, answering questions, collecting stories, and reflecting those stories back to the community. And I think another therapeutic solution that's pretty common even to today in the Black community is theater / performance art, dance, music. I think those are all therapeutic methods that we seek out as a community. And what I bring up the homicide captain and the murder rate here in Philadelphia about is that I've been on a rant for multiple months about there is a reason why the homicide rate is taking an uptick nationwide, and it is the fact that we have all encountered something in this pandemic that is a trauma. It is as big of a trauma as any other loss that you'll experience in your life. With, you know, many hundreds of thousands of people have experienced the direct death of a loved one. You know, many millions of people are associated by one degree of separation from those people, and or are affected because they're, you know, as directly linked to that loved one as the person who was closest to them. You know, if you think about your own life, and I'm again off on a little bit of a rant here, I'm sorry. If you think about your own life, there's, you know, there's at least 2 or 3 people I know in my life. I have a very limited set of friends, but if I died tomorrow, there's, you know, like 3 people who would be traumatized by that death. You know, especially if it was something that was not controllable. You know, if I died in a car accident, that's one thing. If I died from a pandemic, that's something entirely different. And go ahead.
To that, James, I will say that even for those during the pandemic, I think the pandemic itself, as you mentioned, was a trigger, but it also triggered other things for folks. Being within that sense of isolation may have had, because I see it within myself, but it made me become much more reflective upon my own life, because I was spending so much more time alone and having to look at things. And even though Zoom is one thing, but not having those interpersonal meetings and stuff like that every day, you spend more time. It's like, what am I doing? What are my stories? I started thinking about my own stories during this process. And so, and being reflective upon family and history and all that kind of stuff. And I think those things, and this goes back in just to right now, I think people are very fragile. I think we are, as we get ready to reopen, we may be a little bit more mentally fragile than we think we are, that we are thinking we're going to be able to bounce back immediately when there are people who have literally not been out of their house for a year. And that could be somewhat scary. Not having those interactions with people can be scary. And all of these things, you know, I think can be triggering for people. And I think we just have to be kind and gentle to each other in the coming months as we get ready to move back into the world and hopefully come back with a different sense of who we are and our own humanity in that process. That's what I would hope, you know, for in going into this. And but I wanted to mention that one of the things, the show I was talking about, First Cousins, was written by a woman named Karen Smith, who's here in the city. And in that story, in telling that story, you know, because all the characters in the play were African American, just hearing it was a release for them. Sometimes people may not need to go through the process of a formal sense of therapy, but having those ears and having a kind heart and someone listening to your story, for some folks, they find that it's enough. And historically, I remember thinking about when I was a kid, and because I'm an old bird, thinking about, you know, other ways that within the Black community, how child abuse was particularly dealt with, because a lot of times they didn't want to bring the police in on it, because we know what happens within that interaction between Black men or Black people and the police. So the community had a way of dealing with it. You would see people who would not look the same.
Mm-hmm.
You would see people who would pick up and all of a sudden move town. Oh, you got to.
Yeah.
You got to be out of this community. There was, you know, and so there was a very different way of doing. So I'm speaking in this case particularly about the African American community. I think we also see elements of that abuse, that not being able to have those particular outlets being played out in our community in other ways. People deal with it through alcohol. One of the characters in the play, she was a drinker. We don't know how, it doesn't say how heavily, but she mentions cocktails quite a bit. One who went into therapy, when he became much more book learned. He spent his time not wanting to deal with people, just dealing with knowledge. You had others who it affected just the way that their whole personality, and they found other ways to, one became overly religious, these things are symptoms in some ways of the traumas that we have experienced, and have not had a vehicle such as a therapist or as a good a neutral ear to share with. You know what I'm saying? And I hope that as more Black therapists come on the scene, that we will start to see more Black people getting into that, going into that process and being able to find ways to deal with this stuff. Because I believe a lot of our gun violence, a lot of what we see is just because people are being abused in so many ways, and they have no other sense of how to play it out. We hear the stories of the kids carrying the knife because they've been bullied so much. We hear them carrying the gun so much, and nobody's listening to them.
Right.
Right. Is also, I think, a whole trauma. It's a trauma within itself when we talk about African-American kids and trauma, because they are made to be adults so early. You know what I'm saying? We don't have that ability to be kids, so we don't get to function in many ways, and to have those kids make mistake type of moments. We're treated as adults. And so and nobody listens to them because, you can handle it. You can handle. It's weird. It's a weird scenario. I'm still trying to.
We can go right to another topic that I wanted to talk about. This park in Francisville. Francisville is a part of Philadelphia, for my audience who isn't from Philadelphia. This neighborhood, Francisville, it actually has a resident who's relatively well known. There's a trash man who goes on Twitter as your favorite trash man, and he grew up 2 blocks from there, and his mother and grandmother still own homes a couple of blocks from there, and he lives in the area in a rental. And all over Philadelphia, what you'll find is houses that have been torn down, turned into flat lots. And if for the majority of these flat lots, the city owns the property. The city has come in through eminent domain, or through $1 purchases, or through back taxes, and claimed the title to the property in lieu of back taxes or what have you. So all over Philadelphia, you'll find these blank lots, which in and of themselves are a trauma to the community. There's a reason why blank lots cause property values to go down. It's, when you have just a flat lot with nothing but grass and weeds and trash, it is a trauma. It is traumatic to the community, and crime rates, and especially violent crime, goes up in relation to any uncared for property in an area. And it's been shown to be a direct correlation. It's not some correlation versus causation thing. This is actually a causation. Studies have been done where they take these flat lots, they revamp them into parks or new homes or whatever, and once they're productive again, the crime rate in the area goes down. And these are micro areas. So what's interesting to me is that the neighbors of this area, and this is currently a very diverse area. You have young executives, you have people who've lived in that area for generations. You have a wide variety of economic participation, and it's not something that is just what progressive white people would call urban. You know, it is a microcosm of Philadelphia in general, and these folks all got together with, you know, some business leaders leading it, and got together some money, mowed and cleaned these 4 vacant lots, turned it into a dog park and a kids play area. And 3 months later, the city turns around and says, hey, you need to take all this stuff down. We want this lot back. We had planned on putting affordable housing on that lot. I don't know about you, but I would find that traumatic personally.
My God, good Lord. I didn't know anything about this till this second. And yeah, that's going to be traumatic for everybody. I mean, it's that's you can't feel safe in your own home. You can't feel safe by bringing the community together to change the situation, to make it better. And there's this blank thing, the city, saying, nope, nope, you're not allowed to have a better neighborhood. You're not allowed to have any kind of advancement in life. We've just got to tear everything down, and we're going to do what we want, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, talk about trauma. That's insane.
Yeah, so and that is where the term gentrification comes from. You know, like this trauma of not being able to be secure in your own neighborhood and not having control over your own neighborhood, where you've lived for generations, where your family has lived for generations. And you know, a lot of guff gets passed around about, you know, oh, you know, this is just you know, people don't want new people in their neighborhood. People want to, you know, want to be exclusionary. No, you know, like, it's not that. It's this lack of community control. It is a divestment by the city government in communities, an intentional separation, it seems to me anyway. You know, maybe I'm crazy. It seems like when we go ahead.
I was
No,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, sir. Please, Michael.
I was just going to say, you say, you know, am I crazy? Of course you're not crazy. And that's the thing they do. And it goes back to all kinds of trauma. They try to convince you that what you see is not what's happening, to gaslight you. And cities do it, and abusers do it, and community does it, and TV does it, and you're being gaslit. You know, you're not allowed to believe that the assault that's happening to you is happening. And that those are all assaults in every context.
I mean, I have some questions for the community, you know, doing their due diligence in mowing the yard and cleaning it up, that kind of stuff. Did they do their due diligence and find out who, you know, that the city owned it and what was the plan before they decided to build on it? Don't get me wrong. I hate driving around and seeing empty lots and just like, why don't they put a park here? Why don't they put something here for the community? Because in a lot of these communities, and I know Francisville fairly well, and, you know, I know there's a couple of parks, there's and stuff in the area, depending on where you are. But, you know, nobody wants to see just empty lots and that they're just sitting there and there's nothing there. Once again, as you said, it draws in a bad vibe. So I just wonder what was the due diligence on the part of the community before they built, you know? And I'm happy to see and glad that they invested their money in their own community. That's a great idea, and that's what communities should do, areas should do. You know, but due diligence also is prescribed here. Because I also believe in, you know, there should be affordable housing for folks. People should be able to afford.
But this goes into the divestment of the community, is that, you know, there should be affordable housing, But PHA has repeatedly shown that they will give these properties basically for pennies on the dollar to a developer who says that they're going to do affordable housing on that property, and then they end up just doing market rate housing afterwards, and they face no consequences from it. So how, you know, to me, if a lot sits empty for 20 years and, you know, the community decides to do something with it,
difference. 20 years, how long, you know, how long was this lot open? You know what
20
I'm saying?
years.
I can understand. 20 years?
Yes.
It's open for 20 years?
Yes.
Damn. Then yeah, the city's wrong. In this case, I would say the city is wrong. It was 20 years of, when were you going to develop it? You're just letting it become a trash.
They have no on the books plan of dates of when they're going to sell this property and when they're going to develop it into affordable housing. It's just flagged for affordable housing. Dr. Yu.
So then there's nothing left to say.
Ellie Rushing did some amazing work on that. Ellie Rushing is a reporter for the Inquirer, and she did some amazing work on this article about it. Feel free to look on Twitter or Facebook for Ellie Rushing's information and for the article. I'll paste it to you guys here, but yeah, she did some amazing work on it. And it is a fascinating current situation, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. I think it's deserving of some pushback. I think that the city should be reconsidering what it plans to do with that lot, and actually engaging the community and bothering to care about what the community cares about. That's just my opinion.
I agree. If it was sitting there for 20 years and the city wasn't taking care of it, they weren't cutting it, they weren't cleaning out the trash, they weren't doing anything with it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, there definitely should be some pushback in this case. Now that we've put something on it, now you want to say something. Right. For 20 it open and let all sorts of things live in it or whatever. And so yeah.
The disrespect for the community doesn't surprise me, but it always horrifies me. I know I've been fortunate because, you know, I'm a white cis male, you know, I'm the poster boy for privilege, and I get that and I understand that. So I don't have this kind of, I guess, I understand it, but I don't have a personal experience with it. And I lived in West Philly for a little while, and I was horrified the way that Penn keeps pushing out and pushing out and pushing out. And these businesses that have been there for generations, that are part of the community, can no longer afford to stay. They close down. Never mind the pandemic. Before then, I apologize for my little rant. Penn has been a monster eating absolutely everything. And that frustrates me. It frustrates me when that happened in New York, when people can no longer afford to pay the rent for where they've lived for generations and generations and generations. Gentrification, from my view, is never a good thing. Never.
Yeah, and so we're dealing with some words that a lot of people find problematic for one reason or another. Gentrification, you know, I think we have to there's a misunderstanding in the wider community of what the word gentrification means, and you know, another word that people often misunderstand, you know, it is a word that people often misunderstand and don't understand what people mean when they say gentrification. You know, you have incidents like this of, you know, a city government ignoring the community, and what gentrification really means is when outside forces join a community to randomly increase property values basically to benefit rich people that aren't part of the community, and not for reasons that the community wants, which is reinvestment in community and increase their own property values. Speaking of, and just pushing along to ballot questions here, during the primary, Krasner and Vega are on the Democratic primary ballot as the Philadelphia District Attorney's candidates for the Democratic Party. But there are also 4 ballot questions across the state of Pennsylvania. There's 2 additional ballot questions here in Philadelphia, and I'm not going to touch on those because I just don't have them handy. But I did want to talk about the ballot questions are, can be a way that the state government can seek the direct and most relevant input of a community. A ballot question ostensibly would do that. Like, everyone in a community goes to the ballot, hopefully, all the people who are voting and participating get asked these questions. Should we amend the Constitution to do this? Should we get a loan to do that, etc.? It is a good way to engage the community in general. But, politics has a way of being political. So there's 4 ballot questions. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I made a dumb joke. There's 4 ballot questions, and I received the most... Please, Republicans, the RNC of Pennsylvania, do not send me flyers, because I am not as low information as your target audience, and I'm going to rip you a new one. I received the dumbest ass flyer. It was talking about how to vote. Political parties often send out flyers during an election, talking to the public about, what their opinion is on how to vote on a subject. This flyer adorned on the front with a bucolic picture of children playing in masks with bicycles, and on the back there's random pictures of kids and interacting with each other with masks on, and the language of the flyer is "Say yes to our children." Say yes to their safety. With all this imagery, you would think that those in support of saying yes to these ballot questions are in support of pandemic measures designed to control the pandemic and keep our children safe, right? I mean, that's how I instantly translate the imagery in my head, and I've been involved in image making for a long time, so I know that's what they intended. Anyway, so they're asking you to say yes to questions number 1 and 2 on the ballot. Questions 1 and 2 were written by the Republican General Assembly of the state of Pennsylvania. And what they seek to do is completely revoke the executive power of the governor of PA in disaster emergency measure order issuing. Basically, question 1 gives the General Assembly authority to extend or end a disaster emergency instead of the governor. And question 2 makes disaster emergencies mandatorily expire after 21 days, no matter what the emergency is or what's going on, and gives the General Assembly only, not the governor, the authority to end or extend it at 21 days, no matter what is going on. So,
oh my God.
And I'm glad I'm glad that they wrote a pro-pandemic bill because, you know, the pandemic doesn't get enough caring and support.
Oh, I'm just so tired of these people. Lord Jesus. Help me. Oh, Lord.
So in case you're wondering, it would be the editorial advice of this channel and my organization to not to vote no for both of these questions.
That thing is, James, people go read that question wrong because of the way it's worded.
Yeah,
it is worded. When you look at a lot of these addendums and stuff that are added to some of these bills, they're worded in such a way to trick people into voting for something that they know that people would not vote for if they put it in plain English.
Well, they also designed the flyer to make it so that that people would think that voting yes on these questions would somehow support.
Oh, it's like and so many and I was having, you know, I'm a college professor. I just finished a semester. You know, I see it all the time as a college. I taught high school. I've taught many different levels as I was going through school, finishing my degrees and stuff but people can read often, but they don't often comprehend. And they don't often, that's why you have drawings on warning labels. Because people will read it, but it doesn't sink in that you're not supposed to put the radio by the tub while you're taking a bath and it's plugged in. That's why there's still a picture. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
People don't think that deep, not as deep as they dip into some dip. They'll go, but when it comes to understanding something, it's all surface rather than looking at how is this, that wording that you just read for the ballot, how is that laid out to.
Well, what it's laid out is to convince people that they are giving an authority to the General Assembly, but that not detailing that authority already exists in the office of the governor. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're taking it away from the governor because, and if you look at the past year, because we don't trust the governor with that, and that, you know, so we are therefore we're your representatives. And so we're going to do what you want. But we've also seen that across the board, many legislatures don't do what their constituents want.
Right.
Especially when it the GOP.
Yep. And then also consider that the reason that these powers are vested in the executive body, in the executive branch, is because the executive branch is an immediate, they can issue orders. The legislative branch is supposed to take ideas and debate them.
Right.
You can't respond to it. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't respond to it immediately. They still are going to have to go through the governor in some shape, form, or fashion in order to do some things. They cannot just do anything by themselves. It still has to go through that governor, through that process. And they're just making it harder for the governor to do what's necessary for the people. They don't want it to be, sometimes, especially when we're talking about a disaster relief, you only need one head. Why do we have to be able to have that direct action coming from one who's thinking about everybody and not just their particular party. And when we start breaking down senators and congressmen, we're going to start talking about particular parties and particular bents and wings of those parties,
and attempts at gathering power to yourself when you represent less. There's a reason why Mitch McConnell is who he is, and it's because he only represents a couple of 100,000 people, but he has the voice of billions. As when he's doing something that panders to the base. It's 11:03. I'm gonna continue to touch on some of these other topics. Feel free to stick with me, Michael and Dr. Hall. I would love to continue to have you on the conversation. If you need to jump off, I appreciate your time. And I wanted to just acknowledge what time it is. Also, for my audience, thank you for continuing to join us. I'm just going to touch on the other two ballot questions that are also important, but there's not much debate on them. They're just there's some interesting things going on in the center of the state with them. And then we're going to talk about Krasner and the DA race and Vega for a few minutes. But feel free to stick around. And if you have to go, feel free to watch it on the replay. So the other two questions on the ballot. Question number 3 is granting, basically making part of the U.S. Constitution also part of the Pennsylvania Constitution, enshrining in the Pennsylvania Constitution the rights of individuals not to be abridged based on race, ethnicity, or gender. It doesn't go. It's not, written for folks who are super progressive. I don't find that it goes far enough because it doesn't guarantee the rights of people based on gender identity or sexual orientation. But it does, and it doesn't. The language doesn't protect people based on immutable characteristics like, their hair, which was a topic that was brought up in progressive media this week, which was interesting and pretty well covered. But it does basically replicate the 14th Amendment. And in the center of the lovely state of Pennsylvania, where we live, there is a county called Greene County, and the Greene County Republican Party appears to be the only dissenters to question number 3. Question number 3 was written in a bipartisan manner. It basically just enshrines the rights of individuals to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that their constitutional rights not be abridged based on race or ethnicity. Pretty simple. There's massive support from this from both sides of the aisle in the legislature, and so it's probably fait accompli that this passes. There's no catches to this one. It's not written as a gotcha. It's just straight up, hey, let's make the let's make the U.S. Constitution reflected in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and give individuals the rights to not be discriminated against. The Greene County, Pennsylvania Republican Party has issued an opinion that you should vote no against this. What I would find to be a relatively universal position.
Reasoning is.
Hmm?
What is their reasoning?
Oh, their reasoning is that this would open the door to non-citizens, illegal aliens in Pennsylvania.
What? A and B don't connect. What? I don't. So, it's raining, therefore I've turned into mayonnaise.
Yeah.
I mean, I do understand because of the GOP. I get the GOP thing, okay? I understand the GOP thing. When I was growing up in the 70s into the 80s, and I finally got an opportunity to vote, the GOP were then who they are now. But they said the quiet part quiet and the loud part loud. Now they're switched. They're still the same people. That they would want to stop such a thing that is so uncontroversial, sadly does not surprise me at all, because what they want is a fascist government where people behave like they want them to behave, and to remove all voices from people they think shouldn't have voices.
And that's Interestingly, so the GOP has, since the Tea Party movement, been good at several things. They've always been good at branding. They've always been good at taking a bill or an idea from the kind of fascist or anti-populist stance, branding it with a title that would seem to make it populist, or selling it with imagery and words that seem to make it a populist position, like right to work. And it actually does exactly the opposite all the time. So I don't, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is that the Greene County GOP is going opposite the GOP of most of the state, and opposite the stance of the GOP in general, because, you know, the GOP loves to say that they're an inclusive party. You know, big tent politics. Yeah, apparently the argument is that this enshrines ideas like sanctuary cities, enshrines ideas like you know, which, by the way, the idea of sanctuary cities and the idea of illegal aliens, or what they call illegal aliens, non-documented immigrants, people who come into the country without seeking to immigrate first, but then seek to immigrate afterwards. That is actually enshrined in both the policies of the Immigration Bureau, and enshrined in the Constitution, and enshrined in court rulings that have happened over the course of the last 300 years. People are allowed to come into the country and then seek to immigrate. There's nothing illegal about that. It is not actually illegal to come into the country without a visa and then seek immigration status. Their argument is that this would give individuals who are of no immigration status the ability to argue in court that they want to seek immigration status in the state of Pennsylvania. First of all, I don't know any folks that are trying to cross the border from Mexico come into Pennsylvania. We're way far away. Not a huge, I mean, there are big immigrant communities here, but they're like generational immigrant communities. They're people who immigrated. I hate to tell all my fellow South Philly Italians, but you're an immigrant community. You want to be white folk right now, but you're an immigrant community. There's a reason why all y'all live in South Philly, and it's because you were pushed here by the existing white community in Center City, Philadelphia. So that's why y'all think Columbus should be in Marconi Park. And thank you, Dr. Hall, for the sigh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do that out loud?
No, I did it too. It was just in stereo. But yeah, so yeah, this yes. In theory, what the GOP is saying here is, in a way, correct. It does enshrine in the Constitution that people's rights cannot be abridged due to their race. Fortunately, for the rest of us, that right is already enshrined in the federal Constitution. So it exists by virtue of the fact that it is there. This would just be the state of Pennsylvania reserving that right to themselves and enshrining it in our own Constitution for our state courts and for our local courts.
It's harder when we succeed from the Union when the next Civil War happens. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's Greene County, PA, GOP, good luck with that movement, but vote yes on question number 3. Question number 4, should municipal fire companies and EMS services be allowed to borrow money to attain equipment and repair their buildings? Seems pretty non-controversial to me. I don't know. Yeah, sure. Issue a municipal bond.
Yeah, I mean, I've already voted, because I did the mail-in thing, because it's safe, you morons. That was a tiny bit direct, and maybe I said the loud, quiet, and the quiet, loud. But I look at that question and I'm like, well, yeah. Is there somebody actually fighting against this? I don't know. Is there somebody who thinks this shouldn't happen? I would like to know who this person is.
The Greene County GOP.
They don't. Wait. What's the rationalization for the fire department?
The rationalization is that counties like Philadelphia, who have big municipal paid fire companies, municipally run by the city government, and EMS services that are for profit, would be able to have access to limited funding programs that are designed for taxpayer benefit. Hang on a sec, Greene County GOP. You gonna tell me that the fire department for a city of the size of Philadelphia doesn't have a taxpayer benefit? You're gonna tell me that an EMS service, an emergency medical service, outside the fire department, because most of Philadelphia's fire department runs most of our EMS services, but there are, freelance ambulance companies in the city of Philadelphia. They 911 deals with them. You're gonna tell me that EMS getting a new bus, a new rig, is somehow not of benefit to the citizens of Philadelphia?
There's this really weird, frustrating thing going on right now. It's local and it's statewide and it's nationwide. And there's a small handful of people who are just saying, they're trying to convince everyone to say no to everything. Because progress, even slight progress, like that question 3 or question 4, which is a little tiny thing. We're just, somehow good is bad and bad is good. And we're just going to keep knocking everything down until all the toys are off the table because we're just pissy. I don't understand who are you serving? I know it's a rhetorical question, but who are you serving?
Right.
As a representative, who are you serving?
Yeah. And that becomes the question. And who does voting no on that serve? And it really doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve the GOP. It doesn't serve the community, the rural communities that the GOP represents in Greene County. It doesn't serve anybody. So your question is valid, but still remains. I have no idea who it serves, and I have no idea why they would say vote no, other than it makes a nicely balanced yes, no something easy for people to remember. I personally, the exact opposite of this recommendation is the logical one. Obviously during this pandemic, we've relied on our emergency medical services and on our municipal fire departments for much more than they're going to be able to recoup in taxes and in contracts from the cities and municipalities that they serve. So yeah, they're going to have to borrow money, and why not give them the temporary advantage of being able to borrow money at a municipal rate by issuing municipal bonds or asking the city to issue municipal bonds on their behalf. I don't know, just makes sense to me. I don't see who it serves to say no to that question. It's not a controversy, and honestly, you know, won't affect equality in for the most part in a city environment. What it will affect and what it would do is lower the ability of rural emergency service departments to service their constituents, the people that they work for, in counties like Greene County. You know, they wouldn't have the ability to get those buildings repaired. They wouldn't have the ability to get new equipment, modern equipment that can handle fire or emergencies better. So relatively non-controversial to me, but what do I know? The big question that if you're a Democrat, a registered Democrat, that you're going to have to answer is Krasner or Vega here in the city of Philadelphia. Who do you want to be your district attorney? And to answer that, I'd like to touch on a couple things. First thing I'd like to touch on is that and the editorial opinion of when I say I represent the editorial opinion of this channel. I do not endorse either candidate. I am going completely without endorsement for this round. I issue endorsements on my social media and on my channel when I strongly believe in a candidate. However, I don't feel I am a registered independent voter. I cannot vote in this race. As far I can answer the ballot questions, but I can't vote for Krasner or Vega. That's a issue that we'll deal with in the future. I think that PA should have open primaries, but we'll move on for the moment. In saying that I do not endorse either candidate, that doesn't mean that I don't believe that either candidate isn't more or less qualified for the job. It just means that I don't think, as an editorial opinion, you should vote for either. And I respect your opinion if you vote for either. So let's talk a little bit about Larry Krasner. Larry Krasner has been the district attorney for the city of Philadelphia for the past 4 years. In that time, he has brought several quote-unquote reforms to the district attorney's office, including one of the first reforms was firing a number of district attorneys and assistant district attorneys, including Mr. Carlos Vega. These attorneys and assistant district attorneys were fired because they, in the opinion of Mr. Krasner, did not represent what the district attorney's office was trying to do, and did not represent the district attorney's office well, and the city of Philadelphia, in court very well. That's a pretty bold statement from a politician. You know, you don't do your job well enough for me to even support your statements made on behalf of the city in court. That's a pretty damning statement. And what was Mr. Krasner firing these people stating? Mr. Vega has had several cases in his job as an assistant district attorney where he has withheld evidence from the defense, which, if you know anything about courts, is a big no-no. Has employed tactics that coerce and or push defendants into accepting plea agreements that don't reflect their actual innocence or guilt. Has prosecuted cases that the district attorney of the time, which was not Mr. Krasner, told the assistant district attorney not to prosecute, and has pushed for cases with the district attorney that the district attorney, upon review, did not find enough reason to prosecute. In his election campaigning, Mr. Vega has said that it is not up to the district attorney to decide what to prosecute, and not up to them to decide innocence or guilt, but just up to them to decide to do the job of prosecuting. Which is funny because he was fired because he was found to often push for cases that didn't have merit. So let's talk about Mr. Vega. Mr. Vega, since we've sort of transitioned onto it, Mr. Vega is backed by the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge Number 5. Well, backed by their leadership. I don't know that they have membership votes before backing a candidate. I don't know that they don't. I just don't know the status of that. If they do have membership votes, that even speaks worse for the department as a whole. But in this particular case, Mr. Vega is supported by Lodge Number 5, and to the maximum amount that the lodge is allowed to contribute to the campaign. $23,500 has been contributed by the FOP directly to Carlos Vega's campaign. It's my editorial opinion that Mr. Vega is simply a sock puppet for the FOP, and is there to represent the interests of Mr. McNesby and the leadership of the FOP, and not in the interest of the city of Philadelphia or the voters. So that's your choices, folks. A district attorney who has made some changes, whether you agree with all those changes or not, has a pretty good track record as far as conviction percentages, and the cases that he chooses to prosecute do seem to be relatively open and shut or coherent. Versus Carlos Vega, who has shown time and again that he's willing to bend and or break the rules of the court system to get what he views as his job done. Yeah, that's what I got on that. Any thoughts, Michael?
I have actually a question for you, because I don't get the opportunity to vote because I'm not in Philadelphia to vote for Larry Krasner or Vega, because I'm not in Philadelphia County. I am in Delaware County. But I follow the race very strongly because I have been impressed by what Larry Krasner has done. Well, it is not, all the reform that Philadelphia needs. He has reformed to a degree the district attorney's office. What I would like to ask you is, because you say you don't endorse either person as the entity of, I get that, totally. What are your hesitancies about Larry Krasner? I'm not challenging you. I just want to learn.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, I don't take it as a challenge. My hesitancy with Mr. Krasner is that, and actually a local news person actually said it best. Mr. Krasner's politics is of the type that's so woke it becomes pandering. It seems to be designed to, in statement, gather the support of people that, as an actual prosecutor, he can't actually do some of the things that he's saying that he wants to do. The office of a prosecutor, the office and job of a prosecutor is to represent the community in matters of crime in the court. When a crime has been committed, he represents the community in both whether that crime gets investigated, whether that crime gets prosecuted, and then also represents the community in determining what injury has happened to the community and whether that injury needs redress. I've had personal experience and seen lots of experience of other people within the community that, while he's addressed some of the overreach of the Philadelphia prosecutor's office from the past, where the prosecutor's office would prosecute crimes that didn't really injure the community or prosecute people who didn't injure the community. While he's corrected some of that, he's exonerated some, I believe, 30 people now. And he's also looked at the history of the cases in Philadelphia and really tried to fix it up. He also isn't prosecuting things that are injuries to the community, and not going after them hard enough, such as police violence, such as individuals who are committing hate crimes, and he's just kind of letting that slide. And yeah.
I mean, that is, I know, what is the word I'm looking for here? It's irresponsible. And you talked about serving the community, and we talked earlier about people who represent us. And I think this gets lost a lot in our political landscape, that we didn't send them there or elect them to this office to go do the things that they want to do. We've elected to them this office because we think that they represent our point of view and our own personal ethics and morality. And it is frustrating that somebody like Larry Krasner, who should be out there representing the victims in police violence, is not. And it's frustrating that the FOP anywhere, but particularly in Philadelphia, is so incredibly self-serving and hateful. And I feel totally confident saying both of those things. I am a transplant. I came to this area mid-'80s. I was just after move, which is a strange thing to have happened in the city that you just moved to. And I feel like there's this play that happens over and over again in Philadelphia, where the police do something utterly unconscionable, and then somebody yells, somebody gets upset, and then eventually the community just gets used to it, and it gets put back there. Mumia, it gets put back there. And that, I think, is, to, at least from what I have learned over time, goes directly to the FOP, goes directly to the fact that the police have gone unchallenged for so long that somebody even saying something slightly negative about them feels like a body blow, and it's not. And that's just, it frustrates the hell out of me, because I can walk down the street. I am not a target. Tons of my friends are targets, okay? And I have seen cops overreach over and over and over again. I have been actually hassled by the cops because of the fact that I had spiky hair and, an army jacket with peace slogans on it, basically. And for what they did to me, I can only imagine what they do to people of color. I read about it every day, and there's this creature called the FOP that closes over every single accusation in every single crime they commit. So yeah, I would love to see Larry Krasner or somebody else actually dealing with that, because yeah, that's a direct impact to the community. And it's funny, we come back to the same thing over and over again: the impact to the people that you're supposed to be working for.
Yep.
And it's frustrating because we have so little of that, really.
Yep. All right, it's 11:33. I really appreciate your time and the conversation this morning. I'm gonna wrap up the broadcast. We've got stuff to take care of here at home. And again, really appreciate you coming on. Any last thoughts?
I appreciate you having me on. Not really, just that this was a really interesting conversation and went so beyond the scope of what I imagined. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you. That's my last thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us. Do visit sexabusesurvivor.com. We've posted the links in all of our chats. And thank you to all of my guests. Thank you to Dr. Ardencia Hall-Karambe, who dropped out due to technical difficulties. Thank you to Michael Broussard, sexabusesurvivor.com. Thank you to all the folks who watch this broadcast every week. We really appreciate you continuing to tune in. Please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. Please like and share and subscribe. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube to get live updates. Click the notification bell on Facebook or YouTube, and you'll get live notifications there as well. Tune in next week. We'll have another coffee break chat next Wednesday morning. And with that, I'm gonna go out of here on some music, and have a great rest of your day.